Welcome to Family Recipe Radio. Thanks for tuning in. And by tuning in, I mean using your mouse to click the icon of either this video or this Spotify track or wherever you are. That's tuning in nowadays. I don't know if you guys knew. Grow up, old man. There's no tuning in anymore. It's the future now. But yes, thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to delve into the world of goblins, of gnomes, and of other tiny people. No fairies this time. I'm not going to get into that entire universe of lore. The fairies are going to have to wait. Today, it's all gnomes. It's all goblins. The fairies' rougher counterpart, Fairies, I imagine, they probably would smell really good. These guys, not so much. They've been up all night drinking, let's say, a Keystone Light, whatever version of that gnomes and the goblins have. And it's 5 a.m, and they've got to go to the mines. The gnome jobs don't end. They never stop. Someone's got to mine this gold. Somebody's got to do all this stuff. And for the goblins, they don't even have a job. Their sole purpose is just to fuck with you. They just cause mayhem, which I imagine, after millennia of doing this, gets pretty exhausting. So they have to relax somehow, and thus they drink and party and have fun, and then it all starts over again, real working class heroes, the gnomes and goblins. Everybody knows what a gnome looks like, right? You can picture one. You can do it right now. In fact, do that now. Picture a gnome. Just a classic gnome. Hold it in your mind's eye. All right? Now, rotate it away from you with a diagonal slant to the left. All right? See? It's rotating. It's rotating. Stop! Stop the rotating. Okay. Bring it back around so it's facing you. Okay, add another gnome. Now you got 2. Another one, 3. Another one, 4. All right, 4 gnomes. Picture that in your head. See how easy that is? See how simple? That's all to say, we all know what a gnome is. We all know the baseline, the surface level concept of a gnome. But what exactly really are gnomes? Have you ever wondered that? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. What do they want? Why are they even here? What is the life of a gnome? What are they? Is what I'm getting at. And for that matter, what's a goblin? What are these small humanoid critters that have been running through the pages of human history since the very beginning? There's a lot of answers to that question, but a man named Paracelsus gave a pretty good one, in my opinion. He was a Swiss alchemist born in 1493. Now, late in Paracelsus's life, we are not sure the exact year, but he wrote a book called A Book on Nymphs, Sylphs, Pygmies, and Salamanders, and on the Other Spirits. This is basically a book on elemental beings. Now, this is kind of a book on his take of the ecosystem of different beings around us, right? One of his more esoteric books, I guess you would say, on the concept of elemental beings. Now, you probably have heard this concept before. If you think about a lot of different fantasy worlds, you'll find creatures that are associated with the elements, right? There are fire creatures, there are earth creatures like dwarves, water creatures like mermaids, all of that stuff. So this is a very old concept, and Paracelsus in no way created this concept, but he does have a pretty good, succinct, interesting view on these creatures. So the way he categorizes them is like this. Air would be sylphs, water would be nymphs, fire would be salamanders, and earth would be gnomes. Here we go. We've arrived at the gnomes. He also calls them pygmies, but for our purposes, we're gonna go with gnomes. And personally, I'm lumping in goblins with gnomes. It just seems to fit, they have similar behavior, as you'll see. So the life of an elemental being, what does that look like? According to Paracelsus, it is pretty similar to our lives. They are just slightly out of reach from us. I don't know, the way I kind of make sense of this is like this. So let's say human beings were elementals. We are not, according to Paracelsus, actually elementals. We're a different class of beings, but for the sake of argument, let's say we're an elemental. What would our element be? By these rules, our element would be air, because air is the element that provides the least amount of obstacles to us, right? All we have to do is sit here and breathe. Hopefully, you're breathing right now. All other elements require a bit more work to travel through or manipulate. Air, we've got it in the bag. You're doing it right now. So, a gnome, for instance, would be able to just travel through the earth. They make their home in rocks, in mountains. But gnomes can manipulate the other elements. It just takes a bit more work. Think of building a tunnel for humans. That's a way to get through the earth, but we can't just walk through. Fire, we have to be careful. It could burn us, but we can harness its power. So gnomes and other elementals, they can reach out and touch us. They can commune with us. Elementals also have knowledge that we don't have. For instance, they know past and future events. They can gather knowledge that we cannot. But we have things that they don't have, according to Paracelsus, namely a soul. I don't know if I completely agree with this, but his view is that elementals, they don't have the same soul as humans. They're not quite as holy. They're not quite as spiritually potent as humans. We are closer to God on the spiritual ladder than they are. But we are all creations of God. In a way, elementals, they look up to us as a higher being, like we would look up to an angel. So there's this ecosystem or this hierarchy of different creatures, and elementals and humans are we're close to one another, but we are on different levels. And outside of that, there's this whole equation that he has, which kind of breaks down which elementals are drawn to us, which elementals are the closest to us or the easiest for us to understand. But I'm not going to get into all that because I don't really fully understand it. So yeah, that's my really quick caveman-esque breakdown of Paracelsus and his view on elementals, specifically gnomes, for our purposes. So I'll put a reading from this book I referenced at the end of the episode, because I do think it's very, very beautifully written. It has an almost poetic, or I guess fairy tale kind of feel to his writing. It's very fluid, flowy, kind of stream of consciousness. I don't know, it's great. It's very good. It's full of little bits of wisdom, so if you want to hear that, stick around until the very bitter end. But now, we've got some stories to get into. We've got some real shit this episode. I hope you enjoy. We're starting off with a bit of a goblin story coming up next. In my travels around the internet, I found that Zimbabwe has quite the goblin infestation going on. I found quite a few news stories of people being terrorized by goblins. So, I was looking into it, and I did find a creature known as the Tikaloshe, I believe it's called. So before we dive into these, pardon the bird, my window's open, it's really hot. So, oh my god, you bastard. Alright, close the window, we'll try this again. So basically, before we get into these goblin attack stories, I'm gonna read from a book called Zulu Thought Patterns and Symbolism about the Tikaloshe. What is this thing? What does he do? What does he look like? This is a South African brand of goblin. So, here we go. The Tikaloshe is not traditionally a familiar, but is increasingly becoming associated with witches. Certainly, Tikaloshe plays a very important role in the minds of people, more so among townsmen and urbanized people than rural folk. Traditionally, the Tikaloshe was a harmless but mischievous character who constantly played tricks on people. Also in this capacity, the Tikaloshe is far more entertained in the minds of people than ethnographic records indicate. Tikaloshe becomes harmful when he is caught by a witch. There are those who claim that Tikaloshe is the most sought after of all the familiars because he can really sexually satisfy the hunger of witches. As a familiar, Tikaloshe is described as having an exceedingly large member, which, due to its size, has to be carried around the shoulders and around the neck. He is hairy like a pig, of short stature, and after treatment by the witch who has caught him, has a split tongue. When not a familiar, he speaks with a slubber, I hadn't heard that word, but after the operation by the witch, he speaks in a tongue which they can understand. Because the Tikaloshe of necessity is a male, he is the familiar of a female with whom he, like all familiars, has intercourse. He fathers future witches who are brought up by the witch, and then becomes the lover of his own children. I didn't read this very carefully, that's fucking weird. The Tikaloshe is said never to be ridden by the witch. He is too mischievous. He may even throw off the rider. Alright, so, if we're gonna assume that the following goblin attacks were perpetrated by a Tikaloshe, which I think is a safe assumption, as you'll see, there's some sexual undertones. I guess whoever perpetrated these attacks probably did have an exceedingly large member slung around their shoulders. So, yes, let's get into it. The Zimbabwe Panty Thief Goblin. This is from the Zimbabwe Herald, July 26th, 2012. Back when life was simple. Back when we didn't have to worry about the goddamn surveillance state, Palantir coming in, getting a file on me. Fucking, alright. Anyway, panty mysteries solved. The man, Mr. Lamech Nkube. Alright. So just, I can't do the tongue click thing, so we're gonna say Nkube instead of, I'm not even gonna try. There's like a click in this name. Okay. The man, Mr. Lemek Nkube of village Charisikera under Chief Ninjele, made the startling revelations at a cleansing ceremony in the village on Wednesday. The cleansing ceremony, conducted by a Naanga from the Hwange district in Matabeleland North, and a prophet from an apostolic sect, was attended by Chief Njele, hundreds of villagers, and journalists from different media organizations. Chief Njele had invited a traditional healer commonly known as a Siki Mutunda from the Hwange district and a prophet in a bid to bring peace to this area after 26 women woke up recently and found themselves without panties. Chief Njele had sought clearance from the police to have this area cleansed following a bizarre incident. It also emerged during the cleansing ceremony that the mysterious goblin had been tormenting women in the villages since 2004. The ceremony was characterized by drama and chilly witchcraft stories as villagers took turns to stand before the Nanga and the prophet. Mr. Nkube, who became the 25th villager to appear before the Sikimutunda and the prophet, then confessed that he owned a, quote, menacing goblin, which he claimed to have acquired long ago to enhance his luck. Mr. Nkube told the puzzled crowd that the goblin, however, had turned hostile and weird. This is getting weird. I just keep waking up with my house full of panties. It must be my goblin. Certainly not me, Mr. Nkube. I'm a stand-up guy. Alright. The goblin had, however, turned, quote, hostile and weird to a point of going around sleeping with women. A police officer who had been invited to the occasion to maintain order at one time moved in to restore order after some villagers whose wives fell victim to the goblin's sex escapades threatened to beat up Mr. Nkube. The Inanga, who was accompanied by 6 aides, was forced with his team to temporarily stop the witch-hunting ceremony as they accompanied Mr. Nkube to his homestead to capture the goblin, which shared a bedroom. This is fucking crazy. Which shared a bedroom with one of Mr. Nkube's sons. There was more drama as the villagers jostled to have a glimpse of the decorated goblin after the Sikimasunda brought it before the crowd. The goblin, which looked like a living creature, was wearing a pair of blue female panties, which village head Shariki Sarah's wife, Mrs. Silva Marumbe, claimed to be hers. Miss Marumbe claimed during the event that she had lost her panties in mysterious circumstances in 2004. Mysterious circumstances. The goblin was later burnt before the crowd. No, I'll be back. In an interview after the burning of the goblin, Mr. Nkube said he was happy that he was now a free man, saying the creature had been giving him sleepless nights for a long time. Hey, buddy, you wanna go do a job for me? Yeah, you get the panties this time. Got a headache, all right? I got a quota to fill, all right, my goblin boss. He's ordering a whole barrel of them. Mr. Nkube said he bought the goblin in Chikari near Kadoma in 1983 when he was still working in Kawekwe. Kawekwe. Damn, he's had that goblin for years. When I bought this goblin, my purpose was try to have luck in my life. I also wanted to get promoted at work, as well as acquiring wealth. But when I later retired, I learned that the goblin had not performed to my expectations, he said. Mr. Nkube said he started having problems with the goblin after he tried to get rid of him through the Anangas. He said different Anangas he consulted told him that the goblin was now, quote, weird, as it was going around the homesteads looking for women to make love to. As it is, I did not know that this goblin has been taking away the villagers' panties until today. What I only knew was the goblin was at my home, but we were no longer on good terms, said Mr. Nkube, who at that point had looked down in shame. Chief Njele said he decided to invite the Sikimasundas following an outcry from his subjects who were mysteriously losing their panties. Following the mysterious incident that saw 26 females missing their panties, I then consulted the police who advised me to take the necessary measures. With the outcry from the afflicted females, I then quickly moved in and said the only way was to invite these Siki Masundas. I know government does not recommend using the Anangas, but there was nothing I could do when faced with such a dilemma. I also invited an apostolic church prophet to assist in the cleansing, which we witnessed today. No one was charged being found in the possession of these things like the accused, said Chief Njele. This is what we expect, not a situation where these Anangas would charge villagers a lot of money. Chief Njele said he was happy that the culprit who had been wreaking havoc in the area had been identified. He warned villagers against engaging in witchcraft. People in my area need to behave and desist from engaging in witchcraft. Because of this strange missing panties saga, my area is now known the world over for all the wrong reasons, which is a shame. I therefore want to warn my subjects that we will deal with the culprits decisively at our traditional courts, he said. During the ceremony, 8 women from Charisekera and Matanganyika, sorry if that's wrong, I have no idea. My tongue isn't used to doing these shapes. During the ceremony, 8 women from these villages positively identified their panties, which mysteriously went missing and were now in the custody of Chief. He took them! The chief took them! Give them back! Why do you need them? Is this just a giant ruse? It seems like these two guys are working together. Because, really, nothing was solved. The panties are not back to their rightful owners. He's probably gonna give them back to Mr. Nkube. This is insane. Alright. They're now in the custody of Chief Njele. The panties were found dumped in a bushy area under the village head, Paro, about 2 weeks ago. Okay. Wow. What a wild ride. Alright, next up, another goblin attack in Zimbabwe. This is from Newsday.com, Zimbabwe. Teachers and head flee as goblins terrorize school. Menacing goblins reportedly terrorized Zimbabwe primary school in Gokwe Midlands province, forcing the headmaster and some teachers to flee after several attacks. It is reported that the school has been suffering recurrent attacks from goblins for almost a year. This is from 2022, by the way. Sources told Newsday that 5 female pupils were attacked by the creatures just before schools closed. The goblins attacked 5 or 6 girls on the same day. The headmaster ran away. The headmaster ran away after the incident. It was the headmaster! What is going on? The headmaster ran away after the incident. Some teachers have also left the school. I don't know if they were going to come back when schools open, the villager told Newsday. Primary and Secondary Education Ministry spokesman Taungana Nedoro said, "We can't comment on a witchcraft issue. The ministry can't do anything about it. Talk to the chiefs. They will assist you." Zimbabwe National Traditional Healers Association President George Kanidero said that there was a need for this place to be exorcised. This place needs an exorcism. I don't know why I said that like a 70s comedian. This place needs an exorcism. Ha 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 ha. Normally, you need someone who knows how to handle goblins. This is the norm, but this has to come from either the owners of the premises or the people who are being attacked. We don't just approach people at random. So, someone has to own up and state that he or she is being attacked by these things, he said. Alright, we're not going to get too deep into this undercurrent of this story. I don't know what's going on at that school. Is it a goblin? Is it the headmaster? We don't know. Alright, now we have ZimbabweNow.com. Goblins terrorize police station in Matabeleland South. Officers desert station. Alright, this is pretty short, so I'll just do a little summary here. Basically, there was a police station that everybody withdrew from amidst reports of being terrorized by goblins, basically. Strange activity at night. Police officers being, quote, unusually violated by female goblins. Doors opening at night. Basically, they just ran away in terror, and their superiors were like, yeah, you gotta get out of there. Retreat, retreat. We can't handle these goblins. So, yes. I don't really know what to think of this one, but they seem to be taking it very seriously. And then there's one more. Basically, this is just sad. There was a mom who set her son on fire because she thought he was being possessed by a Tikaloshe in Zimbabwe. So that's just depressing. The son did survive, though, and he pressed charges against her. So hopefully he's okay. I'm sure he won't have any long-lasting trauma at all. So yeah, that's the tales of goblins in Zimbabwe. Quite bizarre. Next up, we've got some gnomes, finally. Not exclusively gnomes. It does delve a little bit into just various unassigned tiny people. But these stories are from a book called Modern Mysteries of Britain, 100 Years of Strange Events, by Janet and Colin Board. Nature spirits seem to be solitary creatures, while another category of little people are gregarious and appear to enjoy themselves in sometimes unexpected activities. In the summer of 1964, children in Liverpool reported they had seen little green men in white hats throwing stones and tiny clods of earth at one another on the bowling green. Gnomes! Boo, gnomes! A witness on the Isle of Man, T.C. Kermode, saw, quote, a great crowd of little beings in 1911. They were dressed in red and looked like soldiers drilling as they marched back and forth. The creatures W.E. Thorner saw during... Holy shit, I just turned the page. God. One sec. What was I saying? Ah, yes. The creatures W.E. Thorner saw during World War II on the remote island of Hoy appeared to be dancing on the cliff edge. The weather was stormy and Mr. Thorner found it difficult to keep his footing. Looking up, he was surprised to see a dozen or more wild men dancing about. They were small and had long, dark, bedraggled hair, and Mr. Thorner felt he was a witness to some ritual dance of a tribe of primitive man. One of the strangest reports of recent years comes from Wallaton Park, Nottingham, where in late September of 1979, 4 children aged between 8 and 10 claimed to have seen about 60 little people riding around in little red and white cars. Angela Elliott described what happened. We heard this tinkly bell. We started running, and these little men in cars came out of the bushes. There were about 60 of them in 30 cars shaped like bubble cars. They were half my size and looked old. They had greenish faces with crinkles in them and long white beards with a bit of red on the end. They were laughing in a funny way and driving over swamps near the lake. We were frightened and ran to the gate. I don't think they liked the lights outside because they didn't follow us into the street. Andrew Pierce felt something drop onto him out of the trees. I think it was one of the men, and I fell into the swamp. Patrick Olive also tripped and fell into the swamp. Despite the children's fear and the feeling they were being chased, Angela described the creatures as friendly and joyful. They were wearing yellow tights or trousers, thin blue tops, and caps with baubles on the end like Victorian nightcaps. Angela also recalled having seen them before in the summer holidays a few weeks earlier. Quote, we saw them first in the bushes, and they ran off. 60 gnomes in 30 cars. 60 gnomes in 30 cars. I've never heard of a gnome driving a car before, or any type of transportation, but now we have. Would you like to hear a couple more? Would you like to hear a couple more gnome car stories? Well, you're getting them. Around 1940, 3 girls saw one little man riding around the yard at their home in Kilcampton, Cornwall, in a tiny red car. It was nighttime, and the girls were sleeping together in one bedroom when they were woken by a noise. One heard a buzzing noise, the other heard the sound of music and bells, but on looking out of the window they all saw a little man in a tiny red car driving around in circles. He had a white beard and a red, droopy, pointed hat, and, in particular, was very happy looking. Well, he's also in a really good mood, seems to be a jolly guy. Same with the other gnome car story. I'm sensing a theme here, a gnome joyride theme, perhaps. What do the cars run on? I don't know. Spirit gas? I wish I could ask a gnome, hey, what's your car run on? What's the engine on this sucker like, huh? He'd be like, oh, it runs on blood. It runs on blood. In 1929, a 5-year-old girl and her 8-year-old brother saw a tiny pilot in a tiny plane. They were in the garden of their home in Hertford when they heard the noise of an engine and saw a small aeroplane like a biplane with the wingspan of 12 to 15 inches swoop down over the garden fence. It landed briefly, almost hitting the dustbin, and then took off and flew away again. The pilot wore a leather flying helmet, and he waved at the children as he took off. Oh, so funny. I don't know, it's such a good image. Just careening, almost smashing into the dustbin. Some tiny beer cans just fly out of the window. And he just takes off again. Amazing. Gnomes really are God's perfect creation, aren't they? We have no other reports similar to this, but one witness described a ship in the clouds, which she and a friend saw earlier this century in St. Marin, Cornwall. The ship was red and held many little dwarf-like people who were looking down at the girls, chattering and laughing and pointing. Also, in the early years of this century, around 1912, 2 boys at the other end of the island saw a ferry boat, this time sailing in the sea. The 2 MacDonald boys were searching for driftwood on the beach of the island of Muck, Highland region, and found a tin. They were trying to open it with a stone, when 2 tiny boys with green vests appeared and asked what they were doing. They talked in English and Gaelic, the little people apparently able to speak both perfectly. The boys then saw a tiny boat lying alongside the cove. On board was a tiny woman dressed in green and a dog the size of a rat. She invited them aboard, but they refused, and so she gave them some walnut-sized loaves of bread, which they ate and enjoyed. After announcing that they were leaving, and that, quote, others of our race will be coming, the little people sailed away. Their sister found the 2 boys sitting on the rocks, gazing out to sea. She broke the spell and brought them back to reality. They then began to tremble and were afraid, but when they had been in the company of the little people, they had been awfully happy. The Island of Muck. You can't be living on the Island of Muck. Somebody ought to change that name by now. I mean, I know you gotta respect the ancestors and whatnot, but I don't know, the Island of Muck. The most rubber boots ever worn on an island. So I was gonna see if the Island of Muck had any other sightings and whatnot, because anomalies like this kind of group themselves together typically. I did find a cool bit of info. It's not as fantastical as gnomes driving a little VW Beetle around, but it's still a bit mysterious, nonetheless. So as it turns out, according to a 2024 discovery, Stonehenge which is located in Salisbury, England, contains a stone which originated in the far northeastern corner of Scotland, about 466 miles away. Basically, that is the distance from Seattle to Mount Shasta, so that's crazy, right? It was the largest of the blue stones, as they're called, which are the smaller selection of stones in the structure. But this particular one is the largest one. It's the central stone called the altar stone. It weighs 5 tons. So I just thought it was kind of crazy to drag a stone 460 miles that weighs 5 tons. It's wild. Initially, they thought the site that they mined them from came from about 130 miles away, but that is not the case anymore. So, I don't know. The fact that it's the altar stone seems significant somehow. Must be a very important stone. I mean, maybe they carried it in some kind of act of, religious penance or something, so they could activate it to be used as an altar. You have to put your blood, sweat, and tears into the altar stone before it really gets turned on. I don't know. Who knows? I suppose it is entirely unrelated to gnomes and stuff, because I'd be pretty surprised if there hadn't been a gnome or a goblin over at Stonehenge. I mean, maybe that's where they all come from. Maybe they all just crawl out of the altar stone. As far as gnomes and goblins and other tiny devilish peoples in Scotland, we have quite a few to select from. So I just thought this was kind of fun. So I'm gonna go through real quick their array of goblins and gnomes in Scottish folklore. So there's the Peck, I think it's called, P-E-C-H. That's your basic standard gnome. They're said to be incredibly strong, however, and there's a little folk tale about a Peck on his deathbed accidentally crushing a metal cup when it's offered to him because of his insane grip strength. So even when they're half dead, they're stronger than a man. Then there's the critter called the Bouchan, I think? The Bouchan. He's a shape-shifting hobgoblin, excuse me, I think that's different. Like all of these creatures, he is very mischievous and alarming, but he can also be helpful and good-natured at times. In the book, Popular Tales of the West Highlands, there's a little story of a Bouchan. I can't figure this name out. Bouchan? Anyway, there's one of these guys who befriends a farmer named Callum, who then, out of boredom, I suppose, he just helps the farmer with his daily labor and toilings, but he turns out to be kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, very stubborn and tricky, and just wreaks havoc on this guy's farm one day, and then helps him milk the cows the next. It's mentioned he's a shapeshifter, as I said, but he often chooses the form of a goat, a very stubborn goat, which seemed to match his personality. Then we have brownies. You may have heard the name. I don't know if this is I don't know why they're called brownies. Brownies are generally said to be the most benevolent and helpful gnomes. They're domestic creatures. They live in your house, and they come out and do all your cleaning at night in exchange for small bowls of milk. So I say, raise the wages for the brownies. They can't survive off just little bowls of milk forever. Next up, we have dunnies. We got dunnies. These are goblins that live in the mountains. They have a very antisocial nature, especially compared to brownies. They're like the most feral, primitive goblins, I think. Then we have redcaps, which are like the most evil version of a goblin in Scotland. I think they're more cunning and intelligent than dunnies, and they just are really evil, I guess. They love blood. They inhabit old ruins, old castle ruins, and old battlegrounds and stuff. And they have these little hats that they soak in the blood of fallen warriors. And that's why they're called redcaps. Yes, interesting little vampiric kind of creatures. They love blood. So that's basically the spectrum of Scottish gnomes and goblins. So pick whichever one you'd like to be. I don't know. I mean, brownies wouldn't be that bad. Although you don't really have that much free will, it seems like. You do have a house over, or a roof over your head, and you get all the little bowls of milk you could ever want. But you have to work. I think the Baochen would be the funnest because you have like free will premium. You can just do whatever you want. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that one. I did also discover there's a town in Scotland called Bonnybridge, which supposedly, I don't know how true this is because the story is a bit complicated, but on paper, it's said that they have 300 confirmed UFO sightings per year. So this has to be like the most active UFO spot in the world, if that is actually true. So, I don't know. I never heard of this place, but it's been dubbed the Falkirk Triangle. It's got a population of about 6,000 people today. And less than that in the 90s. 1992 was the first year where these mass sightings started. In 1992, they were about 500 people less, so 5,500 people there. All of this came to light because the Bonnybridge counselor, Billy Buchanan, kept getting phone calls about UFO sightings, and he was like, I've gotten like 2,000 phone calls over the last couple days. We have to do something about this. He ended up organizing this conference there. He invited a hypnotist to try to extract any repressed memories of these sightings. Somewhere along the way, somebody called somebody else. I don't know how this got out exactly, but somebody placed a phone call to Billy, and he said, yeah, this guy called me, and he said there's this alien who's going to show up. His name's Zalus. He's going to give us detailed information about the plan for planet Earth. And then he also was like, I never said that. Like, what? No, not me. What are you talking about? So people say he didn't start the rumor, or maybe did or didn't, or I kind of think he did, because he was going full into this stuff. He did see one, apparently. He did see a UFO. So he says there was like this Japanese documentary crew who came out there to try to catch one on tape or something and interview people. And then he basically was like, well, we gotta get them to build like a manufacturing plant here, like a car manufacturing plant here or something. Anyway, this story is all over the place, but yes. Bonnybridge, the most UFO sightings on Earth in Scotland. Some of the encounters are pretty fascinating. I read some of them in a book called UFO Scotland. But I'm not here to talk about UFOs today. I'm really trying not to get into it every single time. We are here today to talk about gnomes and goblins and tiny people, so I'll spare you the details. Let's move on. We will return now. Now we will return to the book Modern Mysteries of Britain. 100 Years of Strange Events. Again, for 2 more stories here of little people. Little tiny people. So cute. All right. Ernest Suddards was driving his lorry. I love that word. Hop in the lorry, bitch. Bitch, get in my lorry. Alright, Ernest Suddards was driving his lorry near his home in Bradford, West Yorkshire, at 4 a.m. on 16th August 1955. Oh, wow. Vintage. When he and his passenger, his 13-year-old son, both saw a small black creature around 4 feet tall, illuminated in the headlights. It wore skin-tight clothes, black clothes, and held its arms by its side and its feet together, moving forward jerkily. The 2 amazed witnesses also saw a circular, perforated silver disc on its chest below its throat. The entity went out of sight down a passage, and the witnesses were too shaken to pursue it. About 4 years later, a similar entity was encountered in Staffordshire by a man, his wife, and a woman friend. What was going on in Staffordshire with this man and his wife and her friend? They were driving home from work. It was the winter of 1959 to 60, and the car had reached Brockton, where it began to falter going up a hill. When it stalled, the driver tickled the erratic petrol pump, which he believed to be the cause of the breakdown, but after a few yards, the car stopped again. The two passengers were preparing to push when they suddenly became aware they had been joined by a small figure around 3 feet 6 inches tall and dressed in tight, blackish clothing. It had a large head, 3 or 4 times bigger than normal, covered by a transparent bowl. The entity asked if they were in trouble. Are you guys all right? I heard your car break down and I thought I'd check on you. Are you okay? The entity asked if they were in trouble, and on learning of the car's breakdown, began to push. The car, weighing over a ton, moved quickly up the hill. The driver was able to start the engine again, but when he turned back to thank their helper, he was nowhere to be seen.
Fairies are coming in. Just little energy bounce there from the fairies. Just a quick one today. Thank you for joining me.
Now that beautiful audio, blessing your ears, was a YouTube video called Gnome Light Language. Presumably this woman was channeling a gnome and a fairy, it sounds like at the end there. So the light language community is quite a spectacle. I was listening to a bunch earlier, and some of it's pretty nice. They have like some ambient music on a lot of these tracks, but sometimes it's just straight, raw light language, you know? No bells, no whistles. Just the message, just the potent truth contained in the light language. So that was fun. Gnome speak, gnome speak. Alright, anyway, here we go. We're gonna go into some beautiful Reddit posts. Various stories. These are kind of very varied. Lots of good stuff. I hope you enjoy the tales from maybe the best or maybe the worst website ever made, Reddit. Deleted user. Goblin-like creature talked to me as a young child. Oh, let me wet my whistle here. Take a little drink of water. When I was very young, maybe 2 or 3, yes, I have memories from then, me and my parents and my infant brother moved in with my grandparents in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas after my dad lost his job and my parents needed some time to get back on their feet. My grandparents had a large house. They have since moved, so for the first time ever, I was allowed to sleep in my own room. This was better anyway because my parents enjoy sleeping in, and I wouldn't be woken up by my brother every time he cried. Anyway, I was in the room above the porch, and I was excited, but also a little nervous, so my grandparents gave me a nightlight as a means of comfort. It worked, and I fell asleep quickly. Some amount of time later, I awoke to hear a little patter-patter sound coming from the corner. I sat up in my bed and looked over, and right there, dancing around the nightlight, was a purple, goblin-esque creature with huge, yellow-white eyes that glowed. They reminded me of light bulbs. I asked him what he was doing, and he seemed a little startled. He was wearing rags, and he didn't seem dangerous or malevolent. We talked for a while. I don't really remember much about the details of the conversation, except that it was friendly, and his name was Abaskin. The only reason I know we talked for a while is because he realized what time it was and climbed onto the windowsill and stepped backwards into the window and merged with the glass, the way a water droplet merges with another. All I could see was the impression of his eyes in the window. I realized that it was morning. This is how I knew that we talked for a while, and ran to tell my parents. They wrote it off as a dream, and I did too. I've never been inclined to believe in anything supernatural. We never even brought up Abaskin again. That is, until the summer of about 8 years later, we were staying for our summer vacation. This time, I was in a room with my brothers and sisters that we shared above the porch. They were about 3 and 5 years old at the time. One of the days that we were staying, my 5-year-old sister got very sick and wanted to sleep in my parents' room because she was nervous about her asthma or something. At this point, my 3-year-old sister was not afraid of sleeping alone. She was, in fact, excited to, as I had been. She slept that night, and my other sister did so in my parents' room as well, and all was well. Everybody woke up the next morning to an uncharacteristically big breakfast for some special occasion I can't remember. Everybody except for my 3-year-old sister, and sleeping in was out of character for her. My mom went up to investigate, and a few minutes later she came out, white as a sheet. She explained to everybody that she asked my sister if she wasn't hungry for some reason, and she responded that she was hungry, but just so tired from playing with the little man all night. Immediately, my parents and I were thrust back in time. We all remembered the night I had spent playing with a little man. I asked her if the little man had the same name, and she said she was too tired to remember anything. These days, she has no recollection of those events. User Young Hosa. Goblin-like sighting when I was a child. I'm writing this because I made an account here ages ago so that I could ask this and get some insight, but I've never had the courage. I finally feel like doing it today because it's heavy on my mind again. Okay, so I grew up in an old house in the south, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. The house was laid out somewhat circular, as you could walk from the living room to most of the other rooms just by walking in a complete circle and end up back where you started. Interesting. That's cool. When I was around 5, me and my younger sister were chasing each other in circles while my mom cooked dinner. I was in front of her and we were laughing and carrying on. When we got into the dining room, in the inside corner there was a small, greenish creature with a dark cloak on. It had pointy ears that stuck out and sharp teeth. I was young, but it was still very small, so I'd say maybe 2 feet tall. It looked kind of like it had been at the bottom of a pond or something, very old and tattered. It put its finger up to its lips and was grinning. I slammed to a stop, and my sister was chasing me so close, she ran into me, which pushed us both around the corner into the kitchen. We both started screaming, and my mom ran in to see what was the matter, but the thing was gone. This has haunted me for years. I'm 25 now, and although I've done tons of searching, I've never found anything that really fits what we saw. There were a lot of weird things happening in that house when I was young. Disembodied voices, things moving, super weird dreams, but that was obviously the weirdest and most unsettling. P.S. Let me mention, this thing didn't look like a little man or gnome or anything like that. It was more akin to a gremlin type, with no hair I could see, and green skin. Very likely that it was a fae of one sort or another. I've had brownies around a lot, and I've seen one myself. Was laying on my bed, wide awake, reading a book. Suddenly, I see this thing just walk through, literally through, my door. It was maybe 2 feet tall and almost invisible, sort of like the predator when cloaked, but a bit more visible. It walked in and immediately started looking around my room. It had its hand on a chair and was bending down, and it briefly turned to look at me. It did a sort of double take and looked at me right in the eye, like it was surprised I could see it. Then it booked it out of my room like a bat out of hell. It hit the door running and it shook from the impact. Never saw it again. I've noticed that these creatures are always surprised when you can see them, which I think is kind of cute. You're like, oh my god, you can see me right now? I don't know. It's a good little moment between you and a magical creature, I think. Very humanizing for both of you. User Arila. Goblin sighting when I was a child. I know this might sound crazy, but when I was around 2 or 3 years old, 2006 or 2007, my mom and I had just come home from my grandma's house after she got off work, and we arrived home at 6:30 or 7 p.m. I know some people say you can't remember anything from that age, and that my mom might just be influencing me to remember this, but I actually remember this very vividly, and I saw another similar story posted here, and it literally gave my mom and I goosebumps because of how similar it was. So, here it goes. We walked into our house, and I went to go play in my room while my mom started to cook dinner. You see, the goblins, they always come around when your mom's cooking dinner, apparently. That's what I'm learning. I remember I was just playing in my room. Then I step out of my room and start wandering around when I looked into my father's gaming room, but then I saw this goblin-like creature who looks just like the Green Goblin from the Spider-Man comic books. He was wearing a pointy purple hat, pointy purple shoes with pointy ears, and a grin with sharp teeth. He stood about 6 or 7 feet tall. When I saw him, I ran to my mom in the kitchen and started tugging on her to come with me, and she immediately followed after me, and she saw him as well, but he moved into our hallway, and he looked very confused or concerned, like he didn't know where he was. When he looked at us both, he looked surprised. He looked very inhuman, but he didn't instill fear in us. Instead, it was a more calming presence. Then, after he saw us, he ran back towards the gaming room and just disappeared. My mom went to check where it went, but he was nowhere to be found. Mind you, there's only 2 windows, and they were blocked off by a desk, and the windows were closed. Many have told me this is just my dad playing a prank on us, but he was never around, and he isn't nearly as tall as this goblin we saw. We still talk about it to this day, telling the exact same story each time. I still can't get this creepy image out of my head, and I just wanted to come on here to get an explanation on this, or see if anything similar has happened to anybody. Mind you, we lived in the California Bay Area. Please let me know if you've had a similar experience, because I want to know. User Shiny Original Kid 77. Seeing dwarf creature as a child. What could it have been? Not sure if this is the right sub to post this, but I just did a Google search and wasn't really able to find much. When I was a little kid, probably around 4 or 5, I would see this little dwarf in my backyard through the window. He almost looked like a dwarf from Snow White, but older and not so cute. He used to beckon me outside to play, or when I was already in the backyard, he would try to lead me up to the stairs to a workout room that my dad had separate from the house. I never followed him because he scared me. Yeah, that's creepy as shit. When I told my mom about it, she just kind of brushed me off and told me no one was there. And I never told my dad because he was always at work when I would see him. Recently, I was talking to my dad about paranormal experiences, and I told him about the dwarf, and he said he always felt really off in the workout room and never used it much because it was creepy. So anyway, my question is, does anybody have any theories on what this could have been? Little dwarf is in the workout room. He's lifting weights. Getting strong. The last thing you want in your house is a dwarf that's been working out. I can tell you that. I can confidently say that. Worst haunting type possible. A really strong dwarf? No way. He was probably beckoning you outside to have a boxing match. Because I imagine you were roughly the same size when you were a kid. So, I don't know, maybe he just wanted to beat on someone. Who knows? When I was young, probably 4 to 6, I saw a similar creature. I saw him a couple times, always through the window. At the time, I had 3 other siblings, but we didn't talk about seeing the man. He scared us, even to talk about, but we all saw him. I started talking about the little man with my siblings recently, and we all remember a similar interaction. In those days, we had windows that took up most of the wall. My strongest memory happened when my dad was helping me put my pajamas on. I looked up and saw him. He was approximately 12 to 18 inches, clothed, and real sinister looking. He had ratty hair and reminded me of the Christopher Lloyd character from Dennis the Menace. He stood in the backyard at my bedroom window. He gestured to me, and I told my dad there was a monster at the window. He stepped away around the corner of the window. My dad didn't look, though. He was helping me get dressed and kind of just my warning while trying to get my other leg into the PJs. Then the little man stepped back into the window. He waved at me menacingly and lingered for a moment. I tried to get my dad to look. I knew monster wasn't really the right word. No, he's not a monster. He's a bad guy, I said, and he ran away again and didn't come back that night. Come on, Dad. You gotta just turn around and look. There's an evil man outside the window, Dad. He's like, yeah, that's just the pedophile. That's just the neighborhood pedophile, that's fine. He'll get you someday, he got me. I don't know why he's never aged, but yeah, he's always been there. My 2 older siblings saw the same little man, and my younger brother too, at different windows. My big sister, whom I live with now, started talking about our memories a couple months ago. She says the little man appeared outside her window in the honeysuckle bushes often, and leered at her. She was the only one who had her own bedroom. She had a lot of fear in her life stemming from him. My parents eventually replaced the full-frame windows, took out the honeysuckle, and then we moved when I was 7. I also live in California, and we didn't live near the woods or anything, just a regular stucco house in a suburban neighborhood. Replace the windows. That'll get rid of them. It's the windows that are the problem. This is a haunted window. User SD0607. When my brother and I were children, a very small man with green-tinted skin came through our bedroom window and danced on the floor at the foot of my bed. My brother was asleep in the room at the time, and we shared a room. I remember that the little man wore clothes and a hat, and he came more than once. I did not interact with him. I only recall watching in wonder. I told my parents, but they thought it was my imagination, and the little green man became sort of a family joke in good humor. But this was a real event that I have never forgotten. I will add that we live in a rural, forested area of southeast Oklahoma, and our bedroom window faced a part of the woods that small lights had reportedly been seen in many years ago. Yeah, break it down, little guy. Break it down, little green man. Yeah, little breakdancing gnome. Fuck yeah, dude. I would love that. Gnomes out there, if you're listening, please come breakdance in my room. Alright. This blows my mind. When my sister was little, she would say she saw a little green man in a tree dancing, and that he had clothes on. She talked about it for years. We all thought she was imaginative and maybe even a liar. But I can't wait to tell her the little green man exists. Pefquar, user Pefquar5711. Saw a strange creature in the woods. The woods are really the best place for that kind of thing, you know? Hi everyone, this happened to me like 5 years ago when I was 20 years old. It was my mother's birthday, and she wanted to have a big party with all of her friends in a house our family has near a famous Mexican volcano. At 10 o'clock, my mom told me she and some of her friends were gonna go to the forest to share scary stories and asked me if I wanted to come, and of course I said yes. Damn, your mom sounds fucking cool. That's cool. Respect to the mom. Ah, man, sounds like a good party. I'm just reminiscing about this party I never had. We walked for about 15 minutes in the dark and stopped at a little cliff. I don't really know how to describe it. We were on top of a dirt path, and there was another path like that down a couple meters from us, and there was just a lamp post there, which was the only source of light near us. I faced them and that path, and they faced a wall behind me, and I started preparing to tell a story when I see movement down there on the path, and I warned my mom about it, and she and a couple of her friends looked back, and we all saw a small and strange creature. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it was like a meter tall, stood on two legs, had two normal goat-like legs, and the other two were really tiny like a T-Rex. His head was tiny and also goat-shaped with horns, but with more human features on the face, and his torso was really short, almost like it didn't have one, and his legs were 80% of the body. It saw us and started to walk away, but stopped sometimes to watch us over its shoulder with curiosity. I assumed that because of its body language, and then a dog came out of nowhere and started chasing it away, and it went into the dark. We immediately decided to go to another, less scary place, and didn't really talk about that strange encounter. We eventually returned to the house, and then my mom said something like, "Everybody who saw the creature, draw it on a piece of paper so we can compare." Everybody did, and it was the same drawing on everybody's paper. Around 10 people saw it, including children and adults. To this day, we have no idea what it was. User Celebration Neat 740. Very tiny people. Has anyone experienced seeing very tiny people in their childhood, like in Rip Van Winkle? I've heard several stories of typically kids who have seen and even played with these very tiny people. Sometimes they're even seen outside going about their business in the woods. Other stories, I've heard they're actually in the bedroom or on the blanket interacting with the child. I've come across these stories frequently enough that I have to believe the experiences might be as common and specific as things like the Hat Man, the Old Hag, Sasquatch, etc. I'm very interested in any stories or insights you might have. Yes, my first one was one of those hypnagogic dream states. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had to pee. I knew something was off because my legs just flat out quit working. My knees kept buckling, and it took all my focus just to walk. I call it walking, but it was more like shuffling. Trying to work the doorknob was a real challenge. I knew it should work, but I probably spent 5 minutes trying to figure out how to turn it. Then I looked over to the kitchen sink, and lo and behold, there's a 9-inch tall white dude wearing a giant African-type carved and painted mask. It went down to his knees. And suddenly, he's running at me. He seemed mad as heck. I think he was mad that I had turned the lights on. I didn't react. I was too busy with my business. Honestly, having this little dude dancing around in a rage seemed like the least of my worries at that moment. Eventually, I got back to bed, and I realized just how surreal the entire exchange had been. I've seen them since then, while fully awake and sober. They always seem very surprised to see me, like I had snuck up on them suddenly. And they're always sort of off-put at seeing me. If they were human, I would say they are being rude. It's usually out of the corner of my eye type thing, and they don't hang around, zipping off to hide in a bush or what have you. These encounters have always been benign, but I think the weirdest bit is, it always feels natural when it happens, like I should be freaked out that a tiny person is scooting along, but it somehow feels normal. I've seen one as an adult. It's not a story I go around sharing freely, but I saw him in my backyard under a tree late at night. He was wearing a red and black checked lumber jacket and had brown hair. I caught his eye, and I knew the second I looked away, he'd be gone and I'd never see him again, so I tried to stare without blinking for as long as I could. After a few seconds, my eyes started to burn like they'd been open longer, and I started to feel very uneasy, very unwanted in my own yard. I blinked, and he was gone, and to be honest, I think I was relieved. Intelligent Court, 141. Hello! I don't think I've seen a fairy-like creature, but something close? A few years back, when I was a teen, my parents and I were driving to work. I was in the back seat, and I was looking out the window like I normally would. We're driving past these fields, and in between two decent-sized fields, there's a house, and there's this little person, almost the size of a garden gnome, and I can't really fully remember what he was doing, but he seemed to be working, like almost as if he were digging with a shovel, and at first I was confused because I thought maybe it's a mechanical garden decoration and that's why it's moving, right? We'd driven by this house hundreds of times and I'd never seen that before, and the movement was so natural looking that I felt it wasn't mechanical. Anyway, I'm staring at it, and it looks up, and it looks at me, and I swear to God, we made eye contact, and he waved at me and smiled. Now again, this happened in a matter of seconds, and it was crazy because the house was pretty far from the road, and I was still able to make out a smile. Before anyone says something like, well, maybe this house was pretty far out from the road, and I thought this person was smaller than he actually was, no, this little gnome person was as tall as the rest of the small decorations they had. Also, I never saw him again. User mrose99. When I was a kid... Alright. We'll try again. When I was about 7 years old, I was on vacation with my family in California, Palm Desert to be exact. I was staying at my grandpa's house with my two older brothers, Mom, and her best friend. My mom and I were sharing a room with her best friend, and in the room, there were two beds. My mom and I slept in one, and her best friend in the other. The bed we were in was up against the corner of the room, and half of the bed was against the wall, which had a window right next to it. The window was about waist level, and when sleeping, it was right above my head. This particular night, I was sleeping, facing the window, and my mom was laying next to me. I woke up in the middle of the night and everything seemed normal, but the moonlight was shining through the window, and then, out of nowhere, I saw about 15 gingerbread-shaped creatures climbing up from outside of the window, going straight through the glass like you would imagine a ghost would pass through, and they would land right on my stomach. They were all about 3 inches tall, and each were all a different color, but colored brightly and glowing. They were blue, lime green, yellow, red, and pink. They walked all over my mom and I. As a child, I was just in awe. They eventually climbed up the wall to the window and left one by one, again, going straight through the glass. The next morning was what really shocked me. I woke up and ran into my grandpa's dining room, where he and my older brothers were eating breakfast, and I stood at the foot of the table, so excited to tell them what I had seen, or what I thought I had seen. I finished explaining, and then I looked to my right and saw my mother standing right next to me. Her face was pale. She looked at me and said, "I saw them too." I couldn't believe it. To this day, I can't explain what we saw, and whenever I mention it to her, we both kind of laugh it off, because it was just so strange. I've tried to find some kind of answer or explanation on the internet, but I've never found anything remotely close to what we saw. Strange, slightly adorable, possibly fairies, or something else entirely. I've seen my fair share of strange or humanoid things in my life, as has my mom, but this one always kind of stuck on me, because I haven't been able to find any information or similar story on it. Suspicious Half, 5758. My sister and I saw a puckwudgie as kids. A pukwudgie, basically, really quick, is from the Wampanoag people's folklore, usually associated with the New England area, but it's kind of a gnome and a goblin type creature. Although, from what I understand, it's a lot less friendly than gnomes, or goblins for that matter. Has a bit of a darker edge to it. So yes, that's what that word is. That's the definition of a pukwudgie. Here we go. When my sister and I were young, we both saw a pukwudgie in our bedroom. We shared a bunk bed in a trailer as kids, and I slept on the bottom. I was 4 or 5, and she was 7, I think. Late one night when I was getting ready to fall asleep, I saw something moving out of the corner of my eye. A 3-foot-tall, slightly glowing, grayish-blue goblin or troll-looking figure entered into our bedroom. It moved slowly, as if it were just wandering. Its nose, fingers, ears, and feet were elongated, and it had hedgehog-type hair down its back. It had a long, skinny torso, but it was fit and lean with muscle. The entity was wearing a Native American-type outfit as far as the cloth over its body. The entity walked into the middle of the room, stopped, and looked at us both with a blank stare, staring into our eyes. We were both dead quiet. It was weird. I didn't feel scared or threatened when it looked at me. It was more like a feeling of respect and wariness. The stare didn't last long. The entity then looked forward and continued its walk and disappeared through the wall, never to be seen again. I remember asking my sister, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yes." I then grabbed my Nerf gun that was on the bed next to me. I told my sister that if it comes back, I'd shoot it. She said, "Okay," and we went back to sleep. We told our parents and they didn't believe us. No big deal. We weren't distressed about it, but we did both remember the exact details of our sighting throughout the years. As kids growing into adulthood, we had no idea what we saw. We just remembered the exact details of it. User Seidleitr. A goblin or bakemono? I had an unusual... Alright, Alden, lock in now. I had an unusual encounter a few months back I thought I'd catalog here and see if perhaps anyone had seen anything similar. So I was walking home from a friend's who lives several blocks away, somewhere around 1:30 or so. I'd been walking up the south side of a dark residential street they lived on, and was just approaching its intersection with the street that I lived on, which was from that point northwards more or less continuously lit with street lamps, though dark to the south. Glancing about, I noticed something vaguely human-like moving on the sidewalk north of me, across the street and a little ways down. When I say vaguely human-like, it had essentially the shape of a wiry, lanky human and wore nondescript but ordinary worn human clothes, consisting of shorts, a possibly maroon t-shirt, black boots or shoes, and a black leather jacket, and would have seemed like a human but for 3 things. First of all, it did not move like a human. Its motion was very close to that of Gollum from Lord of the Rings. It tended to scamper about on all 4s, limbs splayed wide and head tucked close to its body. It could bound along at a good speed like this, with an animal fluidity and a manic animation that humans rarely display. Shortly after I noticed it, it pounced on something that had rolled from a rubbish bin on the curb that it overturned. It was maybe about 25 meters away at this point, and I was still thinking of it as an eccentrically behaving human, since it was definitely dressed ordinarily enough, though the Gollum-esque violence of its pounce unsettled me enough that I felt inclined to unsnap the strap that kept my knife secure in its sheath. It was around then that I noticed the second odd feature. Its skin was black, and I do mean genuinely midnight black. Not a merely very darkly pigmented person. I've met a number of Central African immigrants who are so dark as to be almost black, and that's not what I mean. I mean truly 0 RGB. It matched its leather jacket perfectly. Not long after I noticed it, Right about when I became aware of its distinct coloration, it looked up and noticed me. I hadn't ever really stopped walking as I observed it, and now crossed the street with a vague angle southward, as I lived on the other side of the street and to the south, keeping an eye on them, or it, as I went. They proceeded to bound across the street too, with the liquid enthusiasm of motion I described above, still on all fours in a golem-like gait, initially moving parallel to my course, but arching towards me as they went. It increased in speed as it came closer. As it kind of galloped across the street, it became apparent that its arms were unusually long as far as human proportions go, its third peculiarity. While it was moving at a good speed, I myself, being long of stride, walk fairly fast naturally, and feeling increasingly alarmed by their behavior, was probably walking at a rather more brisk pace than normal, though I recall being conscious of the intent not to be moving so fast as to cue its instinct to chase. Thus it had failed to gain much on me by the time I traversed to the next block and crossed the street there. On the other side was a bar, and there were a few people who had just emerged into the parking lot. I was looking away from it at this point, as I was moving directly away, though watching peripherally for any sudden approach. But when I passed the bar, I turned and looked back after it. They, or it, had suddenly come to a stop under the last street lamp, now moving upright on two legs, though a bit hunched over, apparently unwilling to cross the street, to the side that I was on. It cast a glance towards the bar and the people now in the parking lot there. It looked towards me, and in a manner that seemed exactly like No-Face in Spirited Away, it gave a great and exaggerated sigh, its whole torso heaving up only to flop its arms almost to the ground in front of it, seemingly in dejection, and with so much expression that I felt like I could hear its sigh, though it was too far away to actually do so. There it stayed, making no further motion until I reached my house and went into my gate. User Spooky House. Spooky House. I think I saw a cherub. I was young, between the ages of 4 and 8. I shared a room with my older sister. I was on the bottom bunk. Again with the bottom bunk. I woke up one night and I saw a cherub hovering in the middle of my room. It didn't really seem to be that interested in me, just looking around my room. It looked like a typical cherub you'd see depicted, white with blonde curly hair, and it looked like a child with wings. I got up and I started following it around my room. I remember it so clearly. I remember it was looking at my stuff. It was on my bed at some point, looking at what I had on my bedside table. Anyway, I didn't feel scared, but I did reach out to touch it, and it screamed, and that scared me. I can't remember how it left. Maybe it was a dream, but I've had vivid lifelike dreams before, and this wasn't the same. I've had other paranormal things happen to me, but I think this is my favorite. Who knows how the universe works? By the way, I wasn't brought up religious or spiritual. I also have so many memories of shadow beings too, like little goblins. Anyway, whatever, that's my cherub story. Has anyone else seen a cherub before? I would love to know. P.S. I didn't mention about its teeth. When it screamed, it had horrible, big pointy teeth, and that's why it scared me. I remember I was behind it, and I reached out to touch it, and it snapped around and screamed in a don't touch me kind of way. That was the only time it acknowledged me, and it went back to nosing around afterwards. I had an experience with a cherub also around that age. My parents had a shelf that was made like a cherub's head with wings. I was sleeping in the living room when, in the middle of the night, I was startled awake by screaming. The cherub's face was screaming and flapping its wings against the wall. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my parents' room, crying, and I told them what happened. The next day, my dad let me throw it down the stairs and break it. I guess I could have been dreaming, but I remember waking up and it was happening, and I could still hear it screaming as I ran away. I remember waking up to 2 children with wings. One wore a black dress and had black hair, the other wore a white dress and was blonde. They were discussing something, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, even though they were literally at an arm's length from where I was laying down. I thought, whoa, that's cool, and I went back to sleep. Next up, we have a tale from Gesta Romanorum, or The Deeds of the Romans. This is a compilation of different medieval folk tales and the like. So here we go. The Benevolent Goblin. In the kingdom of England there was a hillock in the midst of a dense wood. Thither in old days knights and their followers were wont to repair when tired and thirsty after the chase, when one of their number called out, "I thirst! Oh, I thirst!" Okay. When one of their numbers called out, "I thirst," there immediately started up a goblin with a cheerful countenance, clad in a crimson robe. Now lastly, as promised, here's a bit from a book on nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, and salamanders by Paracelsus. How they come to us and become visible to us. All that God has created, he reveals to man, and lets come before him, so that man has and attains knowledge of all happenings of the creatures. Thus God has revealed the devil to man, so that man knows about the devil, and that he has presented the spirits and other matters still more impossible for man to perceive. The angels in heaven he has also sent down to man, so that man really may see that God has angels who serve him. Such revelations do occur, but rarely, only as often as is needed to believe and have faith in them. The same thing happens with the beings about whom I am writing here. They appear also, not in order to have them all live or stay or mix with us, but God lets them wander to us, and be with us, as often as is needed for us to cognize of them, and to know that God creates marvelous works. When he sends an angel to us, we learn that the scriptures speak truthfully of them, and once we know of that one thing, we know enough forever and ever, as long as the seed of man lasts, so that it's not necessary to present things every day. And thus God has also presented these creatures to man, has allowed them to be seen, to deal with the people and talk, and so on, in order that man may know that there are such creatures in the four elements, who miraculously appear before our eyes. And in order that we may have a good knowledge of things, the water people have not only been truly seen by man, but have married him, and have borne him children. Thus also, the mountain people have not only been seen, but people saw them, and talked to them, and received money from them, and blows, and similar things. The same thing happened with the forest people, as was mentioned before. The people saw them and dealt and walked with them. Thus also the Vulcans, who also, as mentioned before, appeared to man and revealed themselves essentially, who they were, and what had to be understood of them all. And so many have been held before man, that from them he may draw and take an adequate philosophy to be explored adequately in the works of God, by the light of man which has been given to man alone, beyond all other creatures. For the like must be perceived by its like, that is, man is a spirit and a man, eternal and immortal. From this reasonably follows a knowledge of other things, namely that he is one who has been created from God, after God. Thus man cannot philosophize at any time about anything unless he has a subject from which his reasoning springs, and on which it is founded. If such a man is possessed by the evil spirit, he must now, at any time, consider what this means. For nothing exists that remains concealed and is not revealed. Everything must come out. Creature, nature, spirit, evil and good, outside and inside, and all arts, and all doctrines, teachings, and what has been created. Sometimes such things become apparent only in so far as they are preserved in the memory of the people. They are still hidden and not generally known. It is not less true that man never becomes as apparent to others as these beings become apparent to man. The nymphs, namely, become apparent to us, but not we to them, except in what they can tell us about their world, as a pilgrim would, who had been in foreign lands. They do not need such rapture, the way the mountain people enrapture us, or the water people, for they have no power over man, and their world is not such that they could adopt us. Man is not suitable in body, but coarse in body, and suitable in chaos, while this is the contrary with them. Therefore, they can well stand our chaos, but not we theirs. Their element is also in itself their chaos, which to us may not be chaos. Thus they appear to us, stay with us, marry with us, and also bear children. Now the fact that they shall be revealed is equal to a divine decree. God sends an angel to us, recommends his creature to him, and then takes him away again. And in the same way, these beings are presented sufficiently before our eyes. This happens with the water people. They come out of their waters to us, make themselves known, act and deal with us, go back to their water, come again. All this to allow man the contemplation of the divine works. Now they are men, but only on the animal side alone, without the soul. From this it follows that they marry men. A water woman takes a man from Adam, and keeps house for him, and gives birth to his children. Of the children, we know they follow after the father, because the father is a man from Adam. A soul is given to the child, and it becomes like a regular man who has an eternal soul. Furthermore, this also is well known, and must be considered, that such women also receive souls by becoming married, so that they are saved before God and by God like other women. It has been experienced in many ways that they are not eternal, but when they are bound to men they become eternal, that is, endowed with a soul like man. You must understand this in the following way. God has created them so much like man, and so resembling him, that nothing could be more alike, and a wonder happened in that they had no soul. But when they enter into a union with man, then the union gives the soul. It is the same as with the union that man has with God, and God with man, a union established by God, which makes it possible for us to enter the kingdom of God. If there were no such union, of what use would the soul be to us? Of none. But now there is that union with man, and therefore the soul is of use to man, who otherwise would have no purpose. This is demonstrated by them also. They have no soul unless they enter into a union with men. And now they have a soul. They die, and nothing remains of them but the beast. And a man who is not in divine union is just like them. Just as the condition of these people is, when they are in union with a man, so is the condition of man when he is in union with God, and thus they demonstrate that they are beasts without man, and like them, man without divine union is nothing. The union of two things with each other can achieve so much that the inferior benefits from the superior and acquires its power. From this it follows that they woo man, and that they seek him assiduously and in secret. A heathen begs for baptism, and woos it in order to acquire his soul and to become alive in Christ. In the same way, they seek love with man, so as to be in union with men. With them, all intelligence and wisdom are outside the qualities of the soul, and not the soul. And so they receive the soul, and their children also, by virtue of Adam's fruit, freedom, and power, which holds and carries them to God. One must also think of what God will do with them in the end, since they are so close to man that they must be considered as wild men, just as you say, the wolf is a wild dog, the ibex a wild goat, and such like. One must also know that not all of them may be married to us. The water people come first. They are the closest to us. Next after them come the forest people, who, however, rarely marry humans and are only obliged to serve them. The Vulcans never attempt to enter into union with humans, and yet are apt to serve them. Know also that two of them, namely the earth mankins and Vulcans, are considered spirits and not creatures, being looked upon as a marriage only, or as ghosts. You must know, however, that just as they appear, thus they are, flesh and blood like another man, and with that, quick and fast like a spirit, as was told in the beginning. They also know all future affairs, present affairs, and the past, which are not apparent but are hidden. In that they can serve man, protect, warn, guide him, and such like, for they have reason in common with man, except in regard to the soul. They have knowledge and intelligence of the spirit, except in regard to God. Thus they are highly gifted, and they know and warn, so that man may learn about such things, and see them, and believe in such creatures. For this purpose, God has let them appear to man, that he may seek knowledge and learn what God effects in such creatures.
Well, I think that just about does it. That's all the gnomes, all the goblins, and all the little tiny people I could even think of. Now that you've feasted upon these tales, all there is left to do is try to find a gnome yourself. So go out into the woods, or maybe you don't even have to. Maybe they'll come to you. Maybe all you have to do is just say, "Hey, gnomes out there, I'd like you to come pay me a visit." So all at once now, everyone together, we will psychically ask these creatures to come pay us a visit, all right? 3, 2, 1. And thank you, gnomes. I'll be seeing you soon. And I'll be seeing everybody else soon. To everyone out there, all you beautiful, lovely people, goodbye and good night.